Let's bring in somebody else to talk about this.
Yeah, former State Department spokesperson, Polaris National Security spokesperson now, founder, I should add, Morgan Ortagus joins us. Morgan, you've been on the ground in Israel before. You've traveled with these State Department delegations with the president. What kind of impact will this trip have on his presidency?
Well, honestly, I think very little. I mean, he's waiting almost 2 years into his presidency, 18 months into his presidency to make an important trip, and he's insulted everybody sort of along the way to get here.
Yeah.
Listen, Israel and Saudi Arabia, UAE, he has really degraded these relationships. They share a common enemy with the United States, and that's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so the fact that he has had such close negotiations, even though they've turned out to be a disaster, but even though he's been talking to the Iranians through the Russians, I might add, the Russians have been our intermediaries in the JCPOA talks. So the fact that he's even talking to them and trying desperately, almost begging to get back into the JCPOA is a huge problem for both Israel and for Saudi Arabia. And as my friend Dan Crenshaw just mentioned, the Biden administration has signaled that they want a consulate potentially for the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. And the big problem with that, Brian, as you know, is the Israelis see Jerusalem as the undisputed capital of the Jewish people of this state of Israel. That's why U.S. law says that the U.S. embassy has to be in Jerusalem and not in Tel Aviv. That's why President Trump and the team moved it there. So I think that there is, you're coming to the region after you sort of purposefully ignored them and many times insulted them over the past 18 months. We handed, under President Trump and Mike Pompeo, we handed Biden and his team a peaceful Middle East through the Abraham Accords, and they've thumbed their nose at it. So I'm not really sure how much they're going to accomplish.
What do you think the conversation will be with the Crown Prince after he has insulted him? President Biden has.
You mean the pariah?
Yeah, what is that introduction like? How does he smooth that over? And then how does he ask to produce more oil?
Well, I don't know how you do, because then you're treating the relationship as being merely transactional. Listen, we've had a relationship with Saudi Arabia since his founding, whenever FDR was famously on the ship with the founding king of Saudi Arabia. Now, the relationship hasn't always been great. 9/11 was a very dark point, because we know most of those hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. But we painfully worked for years. In fact, I spent almost all of 2010 and 2011 in Saudi Arabia working on counterterrorism issues. So for years and years and years, the Saudis have worked to better themselves on this issue. And listen, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist, was absolutely stupid. It was horrific. Everyone thinks that. But we looked at the Middle East and accepted it for the reality that it is. And the reality is that you don't get to peace between Israelis and Palestinians without Saudi Arabia. We knew that, and that's why we continued to have a relationship.
Sure, and that's one of the reasons why it's going to be so awkward when he does meet with MBS, because MBS is the one who ordered Khashoggi be killed.
Morgan, just a quick question about Israel. This is also a government in turmoil. They just changed leaders, and Netanyahu's poised to go back again, right?
I mean, from your lips to God's ears, I think that would be good for the United States. Maybe not great for the Biden administration. Remember, the same people that are in charge of foreign policy right now for Biden were there for Obama. Remember that Netanyahu was very famously taking out the side exit of the White House in some of his meetings. And so it's a democracy, right? That, yes, they've had a lot of elections in Israel, but I think that we are in a very, very perilous time for the Middle East, because the Islamic Republic of Iran has done, over the last 18 months and during these negotiations, all they have done is advance their ability to get a nuclear weapon. We have not enforced sanctions. The United States has not enforced sanctions that are on the books against Iran, so they have enriched Iran. I really see this, guys, as a, this is a face-saving trip for relationships that have really been downgraded, and they have dropped the ball on things like Abraham Accords, which would have solidified the pressure against Iran. Instead, we've just, spent our time in negotiations where we got played.
If we don't enforce, sorry, Steve, I know you have a question. Can I just ask something that she was just talking about? If they don't enforce these sanctions, though, what message does that send to them going forward? They can get away with anything?
You know, that's right. And the big problem when you don't enforce sanctions is it doesn't just apply to Iran, right? What does it tell the North Koreans? What does it tell the Venezuelans? What does it tell any rogue actors around the world when they see that sanctions aren't enforced on Iran, right? When the Russians see it, right? No matter where you are in the world, they think, well, then sanctions become a political tool as opposed to something, you know, you shouldn't be able to get out of U.S. sanctions unless you have changed said behavior that got you into the sanctions in the first place. So listen, this is a damage control trip. You know, maybe he can control the damage. Maybe he can repair some relationships. But there's some pretty deep-seated wounds, and it doesn't help that over the past 2 weeks he's done nothing but reiterate, you know, that he's only going to Saudi because the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council meeting is there. He's gone, you know, he's painstakingly reminded everyone that he's not meeting with MBS, that he's only there because the GCC is meeting. So I sort of feel like he's insulted many of the friends and allies along the way, and I don't think he's going to get the rosy reception that he certainly received in Europe just in the 2 weeks ago.
Right. Ultimately, though, the reason he is in the Middle East is for the oil and gas. And we've heard already from that Reuters tape where Macron told the president just a week or so ago that Saudi Arabia does not have increased capacity. Morgan, he does not have to go to Saudi Arabia to beg for oil. We've got enough in this country, but this administration will not go ahead with, you know, embracing oil and fossil fuels in this country. They've got a green agenda, and they don't want to hack off their environmental left by punching more holes in the ground. He does not need to go to Saudi Arabia, but it's the easy way out.
Listen, you said it even better than I could have. We could solve the problems that we have created here at home. We could solve them ourselves. We could solve the problems in our own house. And actually, I think it makes the United States look terrible whenever it's clear that we're only going over to the Middle East for oil, you know, for energy needs. Right. That makes us look awful, right? We spent years saying that's not why we were there, why we were present. And by the way, we do work with them on counterterrorism issues. China and Russia do have a presence in the Middle East, in the GCC, where we have, you know, the most significant energy and economic expansion. And look, today, on the cover of a Saudi magazine today, there are Israeli IDF soldiers on the pictures. There are people traveling from Dubai to Tel Aviv today, around the region, which never would have happened without President Donald J. Trump.
All right, absolutely, Morgan. And Chinese are, if we don't show up, the Chinese are. And they'll just fill the gap, so we have no choice. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.